Hi everyone, it's Emma. So today I would like to talk about The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I finished this book a little bit ago and I was so overwhelmed that I needed to take some time before making this review because I honestly didn't know what to say. I loved it so much. It was so perfect that I didn't really know what to say about it. Now I've gathered my thoughts, I've let it sit for a while, and I'm ready to discuss. The Night Circus is an adult book. It's kind of fantasy, I guess, urban fantasy / magical realism. It's hard to place this book into a genre. It takes place in the real world in the 1800s, I think, and there's magic. I would say it's magical realism, but I don't know what it's technically classified as. In The Night Circus, we follow this circus that only appears at nighttime, and it pops up in different cities across the world, and you never know where it's going to pop up. You never know how long it's going to be there for. The circus functions as the backdrop for this competition between these two enchanters. These two enchanters have been training for this since their childhood. The way that it is written, we flip between the past and the present. The past slowly catches up to the present, and we're following a couple different storylines, and they all come together in the end. Sometimes between chapters, it'll skip like 3 years where we won't even see the characters. That makes for a really unique read. If you're someone who needs to be drawn in right away and needs a really fast-paced story, it might take you a while to get into this one. It takes place over so many years that it feels a little bit slow, but I actually really enjoyed that because we got so much backstory to the actual plot of this book and what happened in the end. By the time it got there, we understood the characters and the world so well. One of the incredible things about this book is the way that the plot lines and the people who we follow interweaves, and it's very mysterious and you're not quite sure what's going on with this competition that's happening. The enchanters themselves don't know the rules very well, and so we as the reader don't know the rules very well. And sometimes we know more than them, but sometimes we only know what they know, and it's really interesting how it's all revealed. And I'm being vague because it's really hard to give a non-spoilery description of this book. The plot itself and just the overall idea of it is kind of a spoiler. Like what it says on the back is technically a spoiler. I did really like going into this book not knowing much about it at all and being very curious as to what was going on and not really sure. That's all I'm going to say for non-spoilers. I'm going to go in and talk about the plot and the writing and the characters and what I liked about it. So if you haven't read the book, I would suggest you leave now so that you're not spoiled, and please go read this book. It is so beautiful. It is so magical. I don't have a lot of forever favorites. I have lots of books that I loved because I love reading, but this one is for sure a forever favorite. Like for the rest of my life, I will reread this book, which means that it's up to the level of like Pride and Prejudice and Harry Potter. Those kind of books that are my ultimate favorites. This one matched those. If you haven't read the book, leave now, go read the book, and then come back and discuss. That's all I'm going to say. Once I put this book down, you should be gone. First of all, I just kind of want to talk about the overall atmosphere and feeling that the writing gives. The writing is so beautiful and vivid. I could picture everything crystal clearly. I felt like I was in the book living this. In those chapters in between where it would just be describing the circus and it was saying you were doing this, I really felt like I was there. Getting a glimpse of all of the tents, I really enjoyed getting those descriptions of the tents and going inside because reading this book, I wanted to go to the circus. I wanted to be there, and getting those vivid, clear descriptions was like a taste of that and kind of satisfying. I loved how the plot was so twisted together. We followed Bailey when he was a kid and going to the circus for the first time, and then kind of followed him all the way up, like meeting Poppet and Widget, and I loved his storyline. I was so intrigued to see how it would all come together because I knew that it would all come, to a T at the end, and it did, and I really enjoyed the ending. Character-wise, I loved Marco and Celia. I loved their romance. I know it kind of took a back seat. I shipped them hard, and I just thought it was so romantic. It didn't take much for me to be completely invested. Some of the scenes made my heart stop. In the ballroom, I think Marco talked to his tutor, and he was upset, and he just runs into the ballroom and like sweeps Celia into his arms and kisses her, and it makes everyone forget. And I was like swooning because it was so lovely. I loved how they made all the tents for each other. Like even when they weren't in person with each other, I felt like they were connected connected, making the tents for each other, and I loved how the circus was kind of this combination of their efforts. It was really interesting to follow their characters from childhood. We kind of saw the reasons for why they were the way they were because we saw them their whole life. So Marco and him leading Isabel on for so long, it made sense to me because I saw how isolated and lonely his childhood was, that I believed that he would do that without any malicious intent at all, that he knew that he was making a mistake and he should have ended it with her years ago, but that he couldn't because she was the first person that he latched onto and really had an emotional connection to. So I believed that. And in the same way, I believed Celia's hesitancy to jump into a relationship with Marco and to trust him completely because of her father's abuse and his cold-heartedness towards her. They felt so realistic and they were flawed and they made mistakes and things that I didn't approve of, but I understood their characters. Speaking of Isabel, there's something that has been bugging me and I feel like it must have been mentioned and I missed it, but if any of you know, would you please tell me why Isabel gave Marco a fake name and why she was called by that name through the entire book? It was only mentioned twice that I remember. When we first met her, he knew she was lying about what her name was, and when I read that, I was like, is Celia? Is Isabel and Celia the same person? But no, not what it was. And then at the end, it said that Isabel had told him her real name a long time ago. I didn't quite understand who Isabel was. I feel like I missed something, so if any of you know, would you please tell me down below in the comments because I'm super curious. I loved that Poppet and Widget were twins because my brother and I are not twins, but we kind of are in our relationship, so I always love reading about twins. I loved Bailey joining them, and I loved how they kind of roped him into their group and roped him into the circus even though he wasn't a part of it. I really enjoyed their storyline. I really enjoyed seeing Bailey, how he was just a normal person and it could have gone either way. He could have loved the circus and just been like a reveneur the way that it did, and he became like the proprietor of the circus. And I really enjoyed that he was just a normal kid and that he had this love for the circus and this love for the magic and he felt like he belonged there, so he almost didn't hesitate at the end. Poppet and him were adorable, and that part at the end when Poppet is talking to Chandresh, somebody mentions Bailey and she blushes. I liked that whole feel of young love. I loved Poppet and Widget, how they had magic because of the magic of the circus and them being born at the circus. Poppet could kind of read the stars and see the future, and she was getting these glimpses of what was going to happen. It really helped to give this sense of urgency and impending tragedy. I was so nervous at the end of this book that it was going to end tragically that I actually had to put the book down and wait a little bit before finishing. I had butterflies in my stomach. I had the feeling it was going to be okay, especially with Celia and Marco, because they weren't actually together very much, so I had the feeling that they would be together in the end. The two other characters who were super interesting was Marco's teacher and Celia's father. Marco's teacher I found really compelling because he practically abandoned Marco when he was older, didn't spend very much time with him and wasn't loving, wasn't affectionate, and yet he still cared for him, and we saw that in the end. He was such a gray character. That was a super interesting thing about this book, is that all of the characters were gray and they all had faults, but there was no really bad guy or villain, and yet they were all very flawed, and that made it very realistic and grounded in the midst of this incredibly magical, fantastical circus. This whole book felt really real. It didn't feel like it took place in a separate world. The rules of this world still applied. It's just there was also magic. I think part of that was because of how realistic and flawed the characters were. In contrast to Marco's tutor, Celia's father was like the opposite. He was over-involved and always trying to control her life, and yet he was so unloving and didn't seem to care about her as a person at all. And that was really heartbreaking, I think, to see her father be like that. It's really interesting how Marco and her were raised very differently, but they were both lonely and that drew them to each other. I did really find Isabel to be an interesting character as well. The way that she held on to Marco so tightly when she knew that he didn't love her. I wanted her to end it, to be honest. I didn't want Marco to end it. As soon as she read his cards, like way at the beginning, and the lover's card came up, I was like, Isabel, please. But it was interesting what a central part of the story she became. What she did to balance the circus and then what she undid, it played a big part. I found her to be very heartbreaking. I felt bad for her, not in a pity way, but in a achingly sad way, because I wasn't drawn into her and Marco's relationship at all. Erin Morgenstern just really communicated a lot with very little. Celia and Marco's relationship was not a huge part of the plot, and yet it didn't feel underdeveloped at all, and I was so invested. And the same with Isabel and Marco's relationship. It wasn't a huge part of the plot, even smaller than Marco and Celia, and yet I had a very clear opinion on it. I don't think I talked about this enough, but the descriptions and the vivid, clear, crisp beautiful feeling that this book has. It has this romantic feel when they're not talking about the romance. If you know what I mean by romantic, I would get butterflies in my stomach while I was reading it when it was describing something about the circus, like the different tents. The ice garden was by far my favorite tent. I loved that one. I also loved the wishing tree, the one where you went through the tunnels and there were stars above, I think. I liked that scene with Poppet and Widget and Bailey when they went through there. I loved all of the tents, to be honest, but they were so beautifully described. I could feel it. And when Celia was in the ice garden, the temperature in the room dropped. I felt colder, and it felt like that crisp coldness, not the biting bad cold. It felt like that cold that invigorates you. Like, why did I feel that way? I have no idea, just because the writing was so incredible. I was really happy with the end. Despite my feeling of impending doom while I was reading this book, it actually ended really well. I liked how Poppet and Widget and Bailey kind of took over the circus. I liked the idea that this could go on until present day. That glimpse at the end of someone in the modern day going to the circus. I think that's all I have to say about The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I loved this book. I will recommend it to everyone. I've already ordered like 2 different other copies that are coming in the mail because there's so many beautiful editions, and when I read it I just got like the paperback version, and I can't wait till they get here and I will show them to you guys. That's all I have to say. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I still haven't written my Goodreads review, although I plan to, and when I do I'll link that down below. It's going to be less detailed than this review, so if you watch this you don't really need to go see my Goodreads review, but I'll leave my Goodreads linked down below, as well as my Bookstagram and Tumblr if you want to go follow those. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys soon with a new video.